Hello and welcome to BG Podcast, episode 266. I'm A.J. Bingham, founder and CEO of Bingham Group, and joining me is co-host and associate Hannah Garcia.
Hello, everybody.
As always, we're reviewing the prior week in Austin politics. This is the week of August 19th, as well as what's up for the week ahead this week of August 26th. So, starting last week, had some news on council election news. The ballot is set. Last Monday was the deadline to file for the November council elections. We did have some latecomers, I believe, in a few of the districts, notably District 4. With the incumbent being Councilmember Chito Vela. So we had three additional filers there, I believe. So a five-person race and a few other joiners as well. I think there's another person who signed up for the mayoral ticket. So we'll have a link to the City of Austin's official ballot list there, as well as on Tuesday, the city officials city staff rather drew names for the ballot order. So that is all included on the council site. We'll link that in the show notes. But yeah, the stage is set with that. And so now it's just between now and early voting is what, middle of October or so. So here we go. But had any thoughts on the election? Got through the budget and some recess in the budget, and it's going to be. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was very interested to see a lot of folks that haven't necessarily campaigned as hard as others have already. We had some people enter this race, in March.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's some people that, have a head start. But I think as we've seen with national politics, it doesn't really matter when you start. What matters is, can you get the people behind you?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, we're going to see a huge voter turnout, hopefully this fall, which will hopefully trickle down to those down ballot elections. We've got city council all the way at the end of the ballot. So, you vote for president, senate, and so forth, and then you get down to the local races. But, I know I'm preaching to the choir when I tell this to our listeners. Local elections matter. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how this works and to see if people who, aren't as invested as city hall and city politics as we are, maybe if they'll also vote in these down ballot elections and fill out the whole ballot.
Mm-hmm. It's always interesting with that, right? Because Hannah, we see during the course of the year as issues of note arise and how people, at least online, on IG or X, Twitter or Facebook or what have you, make all these comments about the council and this or that, right? And ultimately, though, as most things, right, it comes down to what happens in the ballot box.
Yes.
So whether, I think we've talked about this whenever items have floated up a council, just keeping that, what did they say, that same level of energy at the ballot box. Whether you love them or hate them, it's just, and ultimately, yeah, it depends on what district you're in, but it's keeping that level of an energy, at the election. This is very important. Again, really, regardless of your politics, local elections, it matters nationally, and it matters a lot more, I think, people want to give it credit for, even though, national politics matter, state politics matter, but in Austin, I think it's as we've seen this last year, there's been a lot of items of note around land policy. Again, whether you love it or hate it, parks policy, multiple things, right? Very significant pieces of legislation that involve the public, and I think this is a very clear way of making your voice heard. And these elections, sometimes they're not blowouts, y'all. Sometimes they're very tight. The mayoral election last. When Mayor Watson was running was running for an open seat, was very tight in a runoff. Some other races were like that too. So, and some folks didn't have a challenger at all either. So I think this go around, every seat has at least one. Every person running or every district up for re-election has at least one challenger. But yeah, there are a number of incumbents running for re-election, including the mayor, Councilmember Vela, Councilmember Vesta Fuentes, Councilmember Mackenzie Kelly, and that's four. Let's say four, and then two open seats. So, and we have two open seats, District 7 and District 10. So, y'all, we'll have a link to this in the show notes as well as a good reminder for you to know what district you're in. They did change a little bit. We had some redistricting last year, so to understand what district you're in and who those candidates are, beyond the mayor, which everyone can vote for. So, what I don't want is people texting me asking about a candidate on election day. We'll put resources for y'all to fully inform yourselves. But otherwise, you should, plenty of time to be informed. And all of these candidates are hosting multiple events in their districts. I know going into September, groups like the League of Women Voters and other groups will be hosting candidate forums as well as the city. So ample
Mhm.
opportunity to know these candidates, and it'll be in Spanish as well, to meet these candidates, to know these candidates, and understand how it relates to what you want. And there are a lot of
Mhm.
things, y'all, I think, as we've seen this last 2 years, 2.5 years or so, that you should really pay attention to for things that align your policy, particularly around land use, where you're for a land code reform or against it. This council currently has shown a strong desire to move forward on that. And you need to know what candidate you're voting for, what depending on what I think you feel on that or other issues. So that's off
Yeah,
my
and
soapbox there.
especially I think, kind of coming off of the budget as well, it's how our taxpayer dollars are spent, as well as if we're going to increase them or if we're going to decrease them. It's stuff like water and energy rates, stuff like that, that's super important. And I'm very adamant that local, state and local government is the bread and butter of politics. It's what affects us the most. And so I hope to see people just as amped up about their city council member and the mayor as they are about the presidential election. But we shall see. It all come down to this, come down to November and what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's an exciting time to be alive.
Oh, well, yes, very excited. What a time to be alive. And in these unprecedented, continually unprecedented times that continue to surprise me.
Yes.
So, and on that note, or also late last week, a Travis County judge, issued a temporary order or restraining order halting 13 cities, 13 charter amendments from being, or new charter amendments rather, proposed charter amendments from being put on the November 5th ballot. This was we'll get into the details, we'll put notes on the show notes, but essentially it was around notice, as most things tend to be for people with challenge city initiatives. So more to come on that, but not insignificant. Several of these charter amendments included things such as raising the threshold of signatures needed for a recall election from 10% to 15%, as well as giving city council the authority to appoint and remove the city attorney, as well as requiring that initiative elections and citizen-related charter elections occur in even number general election years. So not insignificant things on that, but currently a judge has held that those, or has halted those temporarily. A full court hearing is scheduled for this week, August 29th at 9 a.m. So more to come on that, hopefully next week, about where those will be on the ballot. And if so, we'll have more information about those leading into November. Uh, Moving to this week, council is back in for regular meeting on Thursday, also August 29th, with a 210 item agenda. One item on there of note is item 138, and this is related to something we've talked about in prior episodes, but it was the climate resiliency bond initiative that was led by Councilmember Ryan Alter, who was also in the news this week for all good stuff. But ultimately council decided to hold, and he was part of this, to hold on putting the bond initiative around on this November's ballot, and instead to look at 2025 or by the latest 2026, November of 2026, to put out this to put forth a bond for climate resiliency, a very comprehensive one. And so what's happening on Thursday again is a resolution establishing a bond election advocacy or advisory task force that will make recommendations regarding what goes into the climate resiliency bond. So again, y'all, this is something very much to pay attention to, because once this is set, these folks will be deciding what goes into a bond package that the council will most likely, I don't see them retracting on this based on the current makeup, in November of next year, 2025 or 2026. It will be significant. There's no dollar amount attached to it, but it won't be, it's not going to be light. So it's something
Yeah.
to pay attention to now. Hannah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's also a chance for the public to give very, granular testimony, get into the weeds on this. If you are someone who has, expertise on a certain aspect of the environment related to city politics, I definitely encourage you to, reach out to your council member, say, hey, I know all about this. I'm an expert in this. Let me, either apply to be on this task force, or even just come and testify to the task force. But this is definitely a great time for people who are very passionate about the climate to get involved with this, because the council is really saying like, hey, like we want our community to make this policy. We're obviously going to be the driving force, but we're going to hand it off to some experts in the community who can then listen to that testimony. And so I think it's going to be, you know, just better policy because of it. And it also, you know, they might discover that, hey, we don't need a bond. We need something else. So this will be a very, I think, interesting, if not very fruitful thing that the city will do that will come up with something, you know, good. Because I think one of the things we know is that, you know, the council being called to something, to do something that is good doesn't necessarily mean good policy. And when they choose to really study things and listen to the community, that's when we get the best policy. I think we've seen that with land use, among other things, as well as homelessness and helping our unhoused individuals that live in our community. And so I think this is arguably one of the best things they could have done, and not just kind of jumping the gun and saying, we're going to raise taxes and start taking money to do this when they don't necessarily know what that money's going to go to.
Exactly. Well said. And there, so council, as part of this resolution, we'll include that in the show notes, but it lays out the criteria for the individuals that they're looking for. And so it's very technical. It's not just community activists and the like, or on the flip side of that, industry insiders and everything else. It's not very specifically it's not hardcore prescriptive, but it is very clear and lay out in terms of the backgrounds and professions they're looking for, what they're trying to put together. So very thoughtful there, and looking forward to see what comes out of this, as well as you know, the actual, you know, the package that comes out next year or in 2026. So I think moving on, in the news today was an article from the Austin American-Statesman relating to council elections, but none this year. Ones that'll be coming up in 2025. But yeah, you know, so relating to this, it was a story about two council members, Councilmember Zoe Kadri and Councilmember Ryan Alter, essentially just about how much money they've raised thus far, and in years they're not racing. This is all due to a removal of a prior order from a federal judge that had blocked council members from campaigning and raising funds during a certain blackout period. I forgot what the actual period was, but it was there. The judge ruled that was unconstitutional, so council members now are free to raise money pretty much year round. So in this article, both those council members had raised significant amounts. Notably, Councilmember Kadri had raised, since I think it's his last reporting cycle ending on June 30th, a little over $130,000. And I believe Ryan Alter was reporting as of June 30th, a little over $66,000. So not insignificant amount of funds. The article goes into just what this beholds in the future. Obviously, we have several candidates now that are campaigning and for the next term and the next cycle in 2026. A number of people are currently in the dais will be termed out. And so we'll see what this bodes to the future. I think these two candidates have just have exercised I knew what's allowed under the law, and I think we see this at the Capitol. It's never a bad thing to build up your war chest at a time and get that going, and it kind of signifies to the voters or to the voting public where you stand and who's giving, and more power to them on that. So any thoughts on this?
Definitely interesting, kind of how everything has played out and how they're allowed to raise money now. But yeah, I think it's good. It's never too early to start campaigning. And it's also, I think it would have been an indication to them if they were not raising any money that maybe they needed to change the way that they were acting on the dais. But in all honesty, I think it's very clear that the support of the community is still behind them. They're not, one of the great things about city council races is there's a cap of about $450 per person, unless they're receiving that money from a PAC. And so what you're being able to see is that a lot of this is literal grassroots donations. So it's very clear that, when you're able to raise that amount of money, it's because the community supports you and you're able to get those donations, which obviously in this economy, everybody's not, rushing to dish out $450. And obviously not everybody's donating $450, but I think it's very clear that these council members are doing what's needed, what the community wants. And obviously we hear some loud voices in the news and at council calling them out for certain things, but I think it's very clear that the community's behind them and they're liking what they're doing on the dais.
I like it too. I think it's something that not necessarily is a requirement. You don't have to raise year round, but just the act of getting out in the community, talking to your constituents, and it could be a campaign event, but I think it cuts both ways for those members, right? They know in talking to folks, what are our policies resonating? If you host an event and no one's coming up because of votes you took, you have a sense for, and particularly people in your district, obviously, that shows. So I think, but again, it's something that was ruled on the ability to, or the blocking of this was ruled unconstitutional by a federal judge. And thus far it's held. I mean, I think there's a challenge on it now, but that's to be determined. But it's held, and these council members they're taking their legal right to exercise the legal right to do that. And so more to come on that. But I thought it was something interesting, right? I think but it is, practically speaking, right? It is a deterrent when you have someone you're running against, your potential challenger out there, and you assume the market's always watching, and folks are looking at, okay, are the knives out or what? But you're coming into your actual election cycle with that kind of funding already. It is telling, and it should be for smart challengers about what this person's capable of doing, prior to someone raising any money.
Yeah, exactly.
And we see the Capitol too. I mean, I think Governor Abbott has north of $20 million just sitting there.
Something like that.
As the like him is sitting there. So it's just obviously it's your right to challenge, but it's being practical too of how much races are going to cost and how much someone can go into it before the actual campaign season.
Exactly.
So with that, that's our news for the week. We'll have more. We should have more next week, depending on see what happens at council and also what happens with this hearing Thursday regarding the 13 charter amendments. But with that, y'all have a great rest of the week. Stay hydrated, and probably it should be. I saw in Where Austin that it'll be under 100 degrees the whole week, so that's great. Still high 90s, but stay out of the sun if you can. Stay hydrated if you are out there, and have a great rest of the week.
Yeah, bye everybody.